ladies and gentlemen, the story you are about to hear is true.
Well, I got a little of it. You want to fill me in on the rest?
They're described as a man and a woman. From their actions, you know they're capable of...
Common sense.
Yes, sir.
Your job, stop them.
HBR Talk with Hannah Wallen. In his 2015 article, Sage Gerard Exposes Paul Elam, Sage perfectly described a particular style of propaganda faced by the men's rights movement. One many of us identify with man boobs, Now We Hunted the Mammoth, publisher David Futrell. Distort context until the target and all supporters appear inhuman. That pretty much sums up the establishment media coverage our movement has had since our existence was noticed outside of our own blogosphere. Their disapproval was clear early on, with Slate's failed feminist publication, XX, lamenting in 2009 that men's rights groups have become frighteningly effective. But in what way? According to the article, we're guilty of promoting information that contradicts feminist narratives on custody issues and intimate partner and sexual violence. Salon chimed in later to assert their fears in an article titled, "Is the men's rights movement growing?" This article admits the issues men's rights advocates seek to address are real and valid, but then accuses the movement of trying to live in the past because we have the audacity to actually complain about them. So, a movement for the rights of men is probably needed, right? Just not a men's rights movement. See how different those two things are? Still, there wasn't much discussion, save for the occasional article that mentioned men's rights or father's rights, often in conjunction with a court case, and often labeling both a backlash against feminism, or the even more inflammatory backlash against women's progress. It wasn't until feminists noticed that men's rights groups were gathering together offline that they began to panic. What kind of person, Vice asked in the title of a 2013 article, goes to a men's rights rally? This article gets much closer to today's establishment media's formula of attempting to poison the well by associating anything they have to admit is valid and rational about our complaints with allegations of an angry, unhinged, and uncontrolled fringe that threatens to drag the entire movement down some hellish road to rampant misogyny and violence. Of course, they're never able to cite any MRAs as evidence of this, but that's beside the point, right? By the time the first international conference on men's issues was held in 2014, the media was primed to attack, with mainstream outlets publishing fictional accounts of the event, some even accompanied by images edited to be as unflattering as humanly possible without looking fully computer-generated. Today, the prevailing description among those hacks bears no resemblance to anything real. Rumors and outright fabrications are valid substitutes whenever the media turns its focus to the men's rights movement. Instead of examining the issues and reporting on discussion trends, the press uses guilt by the loosest of associations or portrays concern over male victims of intimate partner and sexual violence as intent to engage in violence against women. When the women of the movement aren't ignored altogether, we're often labeled victims of domination by our male colleagues, as if we don't have minds of our own and cannot evaluate what we see for ourselves. As a whole, the movement is characterized as a threat to women, so of course the media cannot admit that there are independent women involved in it. And that characterization has led to violent protests wherever speakers have been invited to lecture on or discuss men's issues in an academic or professional setting. As Sage described, when it comes to the men's movement, the media does distort context until the targets, men's rights groups, and all of our supporters appear inhuman to the reader or the viewer. Writer Jeff Charlotte even used a pedophile to harass sexual abuse victims and brought a gal in to use as bait in an attempt to obtain fodder for his planned hit piece. When that failed, he simply made stuff up and published that instead. The question is, why would professionals, sorry, I can't call them journalists, but why would they waste their time? They've all written or lectured on how useless, inept, and self-defeating they think we are. What could they fear from a bunch of so-called whiny man-babies, including the women, who are too busy arguing politics online and echoing ourselves at events, which, despite the protests, supposedly nobody cares about, to ever get anything done? Why spend so much focus on groups who supposedly do nothing but present false, easily discredited assertions backed with wrongly interpreted data that can be easily corrected by any first-year interdisciplinary student? After all, if the movement is everything these no-talent hacks have accused us of being, wouldn't the most effective way to stop us be to stand back, let us hog the spotlight, and watch the world discover on its own how truly horrible we really are? If even half of what they've said about us were true, the movement would be over, its advocates humiliated and defeated in a week. Instead, our opposition is pushing a narrative designed to incite mob violence that is clearly intended to intimidate our constituents and shut down our advocacy. This has led to incidents like the protests at Cambrige University over a speaking event recently held by Justice for Men and Boys to kick off a planned series of similar talks. Before they even bothered to hear from the organizers, campus feminists were calling for the event to be canceled. Their extensive effort included several hit pieces in varsity and other student-oriented publications, a petition, and even a student union lobby to the university. They failed to stop the event, but did get it relocated to another site, still described as a central university site, and able to accommodate the same number of people. In other words, the opposition accomplished nothing, while Mike and Elizabeth made Academics for Academic Freedom's list of individuals who have been banned from speaking at UK or Irish universities or faced campaigns to silence them. The talks were held despite protesters' attempts to disrupt them with noise. Mike Buchanan spoke on equal rights for men and women, and Elizabeth Hobson spoke on the history of feminism. No snowflakes were harmed in the process, but don't tell that to the feminist protesters. They have a victim narrative to maintain. After the event, Mike was targeted with a milkshake protest, and attendee John Bailey and his son were assaulted, restrained, and battered by protesters outside the venue. The varsity news team later contacted Mike with a list of accusations, none of which has been substantiated. They have produced an isolated 1-second clip from a mobile phone video which indicates there is a longer recording that is not being shown, and that raises the question of what's in the omitted portion of the video that the protesters don't want the public to see. As of June 22nd, the woman who threw a milkshake on Mike appears to have been identified, but as of the date of this recording, she has not responded to police requests for contact. Meanwhile, feminists have published several blog posts and articles repeating unsubstantiated allegations against attendees of the talks, and they have heckled those involved with Justice for Men and Boys online in a manner they would surely deem harassment if it were done to them. In all, it has been quite an adventure, and that was just the first planned talk of the series. The influential, the powerful, and the connected have no need to silence anyone they do not have reason to fear. What is it exactly that they are afraid of? Could it be that opponents of the movement are not as confident in their information as they claim?